Ladies and gentlemen, look at the crowds. Look at the television rating. Look at the practice courts where security has to be called in just to manage the overflow of fans. The tennis world is currently staring at a paradox that defies the traditional logic of the sport. We are witnessing a player with a fan base that looks like it belongs to a multiple-time Grand Slam champion, yet she has never won a single WTA main tour title. Not one. I need you to hold both of those facts in your mind at the same time, because the massive echoing distance between those two realities explains every single thing that happened this week. If you are Filipino, you probably felt this story in your gut before you even fully understood the mechanics of the controversy. You have watched Alex Eala walk onto the biggest stages in this sport and dismantle players who were already crowned as the next legends. You watched her carry the Philippine flag deeper into the Grand Slam draws than any Filipina in the history of the game. You've seen families waking up before the sun, crowding around screens, and celebrating individual points as if they were national holidays. For a few fleeting days, it felt like the global tennis establishment finally understood what Filipino fans have been shouting for years, and then one single repost changed the entire mood. We need to talk about John Wertheim. He didn't publish a hit piece. He didn't record an hour-long podcast rant. He didn't even call Alex Eala overrated. He didn't even type her name. He simply reposted a message celebrating another young player, a teenager who had just secured a WTA main tour title. The comparison was so obvious it was blinding. That teenager had a trophy. Alex did not. Wertheim added absolutely no comment, no context, and no explanation, and somehow that silence felt louder and more aggressive than a direct insult. Why? Why did one single click from one American tennis journalist ignite this level of fury? Why did fans react as if Alex had been dismissed and discarded, even though nobody had actually criticized her directly? That is the burning question underneath this entire saga. But before we decide what that repost meant, there is a detail you need to hear that changes the argument completely. 3 weeks before this storm broke, John Wertheim sat across from Alex Eala at Wimbledon. He held the microphone. He asked her about one of the most significant victories of her entire career. He gave her the platform and the space to explain her rise to a global audience. That doesn't prove he agrees with the hype, and it doesn't prove the repost was harmless, but it makes the theory of personal hatred much harder to defend. This wasn't a vendetta. So if hatred isn't the answer, we have to look for something much bigger. The answer isn't just about one journalist. It's about a system that no longer knows how to measure value in the modern age. To get to the bottom of this, we have to look at the two people at the center of the collision. First, there is Alex. This is a young woman who left the Philippines as a child, moving thousands of miles away to the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. Do you understand the weight of that decision? That takes more than just a backhand. It requires a level of sacrifice, cultural adjustment, and sheer pressure that most of us cannot fathom. She was living inside a sport where every single person around her came from a country with a deep, established tennis tradition. The Philippines didn't have that. They had boxing icons, sure, but tennis was a foreign frontier. There was no map, no path, and no line of former champions to show her the way. Every single ceiling she hit was a new discovery. As a junior, she made history. But then she hit the professional ranks, the graveyard where promising careers go to die under the weight of travel, injury, and the brutal reality of the rankings. Alex didn't fade. She climbed. She broke into the top 50, then the top 30. And here's the kicker. Her rise wasn't built on one lucky week. It was built on months of consistency, elite victories, and performances across every surface. A single tournament can change a career, but a top 30 ranking requires you to show up and win for an entire season. That is why Alex became a global story before she ever touched a major main tour trophy. Her story wasn't just about the past, it was about the inevitable future. Then came the moment that changed everything, Wimbledon. She didn't just show up, she conquered. She beat Renata Zarazua, she beat Maya Joint. And then she stood across the net from Iga Swiatek, a defining champion of this generation. Alex wasn't the favorite. She was the underdog carrying the hope of a nation into a space it had never occupied, and she won. That victory didn't just move her into the next round. It changed the scale of her existence. She reached the fourth round and pushed Jasmine Paolini to the absolute limit in a three-set war. The run ended, but the impact was permanent. That is the first person in this story. The second is John Wertheim. For years, he has been one of the most recognizable voices in American tennis media. He doesn't own the conversation, but people in his position decide which stories get the oxygen. They influence who gets the show courts, who gets the sponsorships, and how casual fans perceive the game. In the modern sports world, attention is currency. It is as real as a ranking point. And Alex Eala exists at the exact intersection where results and cultural significance. To her fans, she isn't just a player, she is proof. She is the living evidence that a player from the Philippines can walk into these elite spaces and belong. She is proof that tennis doesn't belong only to the countries with the million-dollar infrastructures and the decades of tradition. That is why the reaction to a simple repost became so emotional so fast. A debate about trophies was never going to be normal. For one side, this was about technical achievement. For the other, it was about recognition. And when those worlds collided, a repost became a battleground. Let's look at the facts of what triggered it. An 18-year-old Austrian named Lulu Sun? No, let's look at the actual player, Lily Tagger, who won the Prague Open. It was a WTA main tour title. It was a massive achievement. An account on social media celebrated her and pointed out the contrast between her trophy and the players who were getting more media coverage. They didn't have to say Alex's name. Everyone knew who they meant. Tagger was younger. Tagger had the title, so why was Alex getting the spotlight? Wertheim hit repost, no comment. And in that vacuum, the fans filled the silence with their own interpretations. Some saw it as a fair correction. Many others saw a powerful media voice quietly agreeing that Alex Eala was a fraud who didn't deserve her fame. And here is the part that makes everyone uncomfortable. The central fact behind the comparison was technically accurate. Alex has not won a WTA main tour title. Yes, she won Birmingham, but that was a WTA 125 event. That is a significant achievement, but it is one tier below the main tour. Her other major results were deep runs and victories over elite players, but the trophy cabinet for the main tour remains empty. The repost pointed directly at that gap. So why the explosion? Because fans weren't just responding to one post, they were responding to a history of broken trust. We have to look at Wertheim's track record. During the 2024 WTA finals, a comment he made about Barbara Krejcikova's appearance, specifically her forehead, leaked onto the broadcast. Krejcikova was a Wimbledon champion, one of the best on the planet, and yet he reduced her to a joke about her looks. That moment is burned into the memory of the fans. When trust is that damaged, silence is never interpreted as neutral. Fans fill that silence with the memory of past disrespect. But I'm telling you, this story is more complicated than a simple narrative of a villain versus a hero. 3 weeks prior, the same man gave her the floor at Wimbledon. He discussed her tactics. He helped present her to the world. We cannot know his private thoughts, but we can see that the sport is currently struggling with a measurement problem. There are two scoreboards in tennis right now. The first is the traditional scoreboard. It tracks titles, trophies, and ranking points. It is objective, cold, and clear. On that scoreboard, Lily Tagger did something Alex hasn't. She won a main tour title. That fact cannot be ignored. But then there is the second scoreboard. This one measures attention. It measures how many people fill the seats, how many people stay up all night to watch a first-round match, and how many new fans are being pulled into the sport. On that scoreboard, Alex Eala is playing a completely different game than almost anyone else her age. Very few players without a main tour title can turn a routine practice session into a public event. Very few can make an entire country reorganize its lifestyle around a tennis match. The traditional scoreboard says she has work to do. The attention scoreboard says she is already one of the most valuable assets in the game. Both of these scoreboards are real. The problem is when people pretend only one of them matters. Tagger's supporters are right to say titles are the ultimate goal. Alex's supporters are right to say that cultural impact is a form of greatness. Think about what happened to the music industry when streaming took over. For decades, success was measured by physical record sales. Then the audience changed their behavior. The old numbers didn't become fake. They just stopped telling the whole story. Tennis is going through that exact shift right now. Titles still matter, but social reach and the ability to inspire an entire demographic matter too. Alex is forcing the sport to confront the fact that she is becoming a superstar faster than the traditional checklist allows. That creates friction. When a player becomes visible before they've checked every box, the old guard feels the need to restore order. They point at the missing trophy to remind everyone that the hierarchy still exists. That reminder might be factual, but it also reveals a fear that the old model is breaking. The evidence of Alex's impact is undeniable. Look at what happened in Washington. This wasn't a final. This wasn't even a match. She was hitting with Ashlyn Kruger in a standard training session, and yet fans flooded the court. They watched the drills. They waited for hours just for an autograph. Security had to step in. That scene doesn't prove she's better than everyone with a title, but it proves her value is independent of a trophy. People are invested in the journey itself, which is incredibly rare. Then look at the ranking. A title tells you who had the best week. A top 30 ranking tells you who survived the grind of an entire year. Alex has beaten Iga Swiatek. She has beaten Elena Rybakina. She has beaten Alina Svitolina. These aren't hyped victories. They are facts on the ground. When you listen to the players who actually face her, the story changes again. Swiatek admitted that Alex created tactical problems for her. Qinwen Zheng, an Olympic gold medalist, spoke about how difficult it is to remain focused against her. Champions don't give out empty praise to opponents they don't fear. They adjust their plans because they know the threat is real. So why does silence hurt more than an insult? Because an insult acknowledges that you are important enough to be attacked. Silence suggests you are replaceable. For Filipino fans, that hits a nerve that goes back decades. Alex represents a nation that has been invisible in the global tennis conversation. Her fans aren't just cheering for a player. They are defending their right to be seen. When a major media voice suggests the attention belongs elsewhere, they don't hear a technical argument about WTA levels. They hear the same old message. You are taking up too much space. You aren't the main story. That is the source of the heat. But let's be real about the conclusion here. Alex is not famous because the world misunderstands tennis. She is famous because she is changing who watches it. Her success doesn't take away from Lily Tagger, and Tagger's title doesn't invalidate Alex's impact. This shouldn't be a war between two young athletes. The real conflict is between two different ways of defining success. One says you need the trophy first. The other says the story begins the moment you prove you belong. Alex is living in the gap between those two definitions, and that is exactly why her story is so compelling. The missing title is a weakness in her resume, sure, but as a narrative, it creates massive tension. Every tournament becomes a high-stakes question. Is this the week the attention finally meets the hardware? When she eventually lifts that first main tour trophy, and given her trajectory, it feels like a matter of when, not if, the loudest criticism against her will vanish instantly. The people claiming her fame is premature will lose their only talking point. The fans won't just see it as a win. They will see it as a total vindication. That is why this upcoming hardcourt swing is so critical. Washington, Toronto, Cincinnati, and then the U.S. Open in New York. The road is brutal. She'll have to face the likes of Qinwen Zheng or Leylah Fernandez. There are no guarantees in this sport. She might lose early. She might struggle with the weight of the expectations. That is the reality of the tour. But the opportunity is staring her in the face. The best Grand Slam result for a Filipino player is still a quarterfinal run from Felicimo Ampan back in the 1950s. That record has stood for over 70 years. For the first time in 7 decades, breaking that record doesn't sound like a fantasy. It sounds like a plan. That is the part the old scoreboard can't capture. The significance of Alex Eala isn't just what she has won. It's the fact that millions of people now believe something historic could happen every single time she steps onto a court. That belief moves tickets. It fills the practice stands. It creates the pressure that either makes diamonds or breaks careers. Was the Repost betrayal? I don't think the evidence supports that. It was likely a comment on the media landscape or a simple acknowledgement of another player's success. But the reaction showed us that tennis is in the middle of a civil war over how we measure greatness. The old model says trophies create the story. Alex Eala is proving that sometimes the story becomes so big it demands a trophy. She didn't get here through marketing alone. She got here by taking down champions and climbing a ladder that had no rungs for someone from her country. She made the world notice. Now she has to finish the job. The next answer isn't going to come from a social media post or a journalist's click. It's going to come from the baseline. It's going to come from the sweat and the tactical adjustments in the heat of a 3-set match. Whether she wins that title this summer or next year, the conversation has already shifted. Alex Eala is no longer asking for permission to be a superstar. She already is one. Now, she just has to force the history books to reflect what the fans already know. I'll be watching every single point of this swing from the first serve in D.C. to the final match in New York, because this argument won't be settled by a reporter. It will be settled when she gives the sport a result that no scoreboard, old or new, can possibly ignore. I'm telling you, get ready. The clock is ticking and the game is just getting started. I will see you in the next one.